You know, I'm watching this Lacey Clancy story on TV on the news now. It's on about her killing her three children and then trying to kill herself. And she obviously suffered a mental breakdown. And she was on mental medication prior to the killings. And so I think this is a total failure of the mental health society. I don't know what state she's in, but uh, I'm not surprised because the mental health society doesn't do anything until after the murder, not before. Uh, and when they do go after people and try to help them, or in their eyes, try to help them, they're usually helping the wrong ones, you know, because when someone hurts someone because they're mentally ill, there's no warning signs. I mean, she had signs. She asked her uh, mother-in-law to help her with the kids, and she told her she was breaking down. She was losing a grip on reality and all these kinds of things. And she begged for help. She literally begged for help and was refused. You know, so in that sense, you can say there was warning signs, and they were ignored. Uh, it's more like those are your kids. You deal with them. And the grandmother didn't want to deal with them, and the grandmother should have called the father or called someone else if she couldn't do it and handled the situation, considering she was already on mental illness medication. So, and I think diagnosed with bipolar. So the postpartum was really not a far stretch. Yeah. So I think everybody just dropped the ball. And the fact that she's on trial is utterly pathetic. She shouldn't be on trial. She should be in a hospital being treated. Apparently, from her attempted suicide, she paralyzed herself. So I don't know what punishment you can give her that would be worse than that. Although being in a jail, at a prison, being paralyzed is not a fun place to be or a way to be. So, and she'll never walk again, and I don't see her hurting anybody else in the future. Um, so she shouldn't spend but maybe a few months in a mental hospital where they get her medication straight and her living situation straight, and then she should be released. Uh, it's a shame. I don't know if her husband divorced her before the killing or after, but if it was after, it's a shame. I mean, would you divorce your husband or wife if they had brain cancer? And I know then you say, well, if they killed my children, but if they killed their children with a brain tumor, would you divorce them? So it's kind of like not much different than that. And I don't think you would. I think you'd be extremely hurt, but to attack Lacey or to attack the husband or wife that did this would be the wrong direction to put your energy. Uh, that sometimes things just happen, and we want to blame, we want to take out the label jar and pull out murderer or psycho. It's just things happen. I mean, there's a reason. There's a logical reason why it happened, and because of that, it's just like the brain tumor. She's not responsible, uh, and she didn't cause her mental illness. She didn't have children, so she could hurt them. She wasn't a abusive mother before she hurt them. She was a very loving, caring mother before she hurt them. And I think she begged for help. She didn't want to hurt them. She did what she could to avoid that. And it was rebuffed and kicked back at her like not our problem uh, by her own family. So, and my question is, where was the husband? Why wasn't he there, or the father? And yeah, I think some of the blame falls on him and his lack of response, knowing that she was bipolar. Uh, so, I mean, in most of these situations, in most of these kind of killings or murders, they're not bipolar, or they're not labeled bipolar. They're not on bipolar meds. They're not on psych meds, and all of a sudden you come home to dead children, and it's like out of the blue. It's you had no clue whatsoever. But this one isn't like that. This one had clues. This one had a track record. So I think it's very pathetic what the mental health industry did to her. They put her on medication and sent her home. And to a great extent, that does work. But on these occasions, it obviously doesn't. So, and it's hard to decipher between what's going to work and who's not going to work. And I know, but with the calls for help make it where they failed. It's just like the guy in New York City in the subway. He went to that killed a woman by throwing her on the tracks, and she was I don't know how old. She was a young woman, and this mentally ill person went to psych wards. Went to, I don't know, it was two, but I know he went to one, and he begged for them to enter him and help him and give him a bed and all that, and the hospital refused. So he went out and killed this girl. Uh, so hospital is responsible for that. And what did the government, what did New York State do? They created AOT, which is basically probation for mentally ill people. Now, you don't have to commit a crime to go on this probation, and you can't go to jail if you violate the probation. You go to a psych ward. You don't go to jail. But I've been in psych wards, and there's not much difference. So, it's just, it's a failed system. And the problem is nobody's trying to fix it. Nobody's trying to make it right. You know, I don't think you should need AOT to have a mentally ill person, because the problem with the stipulations of AOT is that you have to take your medication. You can't be homeless. You have to be housed. You have to see a therapist. You have to see a psychiatrist. Uh, you if you qualify, I don't know. I guess most people qualify, but if you don't, I guess something's worked out. But if you qualify, you get Social Security. You get Social Security. You get food stamps. You get whatever you qualify for. So you don't go hungry and you're not poor. You're poor, but you know, so you're not homeless. And I don't think you should need an AOT order to make those things happen. I think if you're mentally ill, those things should be academic. You should get it automatically. Um, you know, I think like Linda Vaccaro, the one that does the people call about bills that they can't get rid of, and uh, she goes and fights to get the money back and all that, and puts the business on the news saying they robbed this woman. And not always a business; it's the government with tickets that they won't take care of. they keep denying to the charge or saying they didn't make a mistake and they're not going to uh, honor it. So she gets involved, and it gets reversed, and the government or the business sends an apology and a check, or relieves them of a bill in some way. And it's not just always money, but it usually focuses around money. Uh, but you shouldn't have to call Linda Vaquero to get a problem solved. I mean, she's one person. It's one news organization. I know there's others, but you shouldn't have to call them to get your ticket worked out. So I mean, how many people can she actually take to do a story on? I'm sure thousands of people call her every day, and she has to tell them no. And it's just these companies, these government organizations, these courts should deal with it without a news camera in their face. And it's just pathetic. It's just like this court trial with Lacey. She doesn't need to be in trial. The Mental Health Society needs to be on trial, not her. She's a victim of the Mental Health Society, and so are her children. And I think the fact that it's being portrayed as that she's a murderer and she's a bad person and she killed her kids and she should burn in hell kind of thing is just uh, very short-sighted. And it's funny that Fox News is the one showing the trial. They have a rapist murderer as a president that they put in the presidency, and they're going after a woman that's mentally ill and disturbed and has a lot of problems, hurt her children. I'm sure regrets it deeply. And but the president, uh, he could kill anybody he wants, and they'll tote him as the best president we ever had. So it's just the disparity is pathetic. So, and I think the fact that nobody calls out uh, the disparity is even more pathetic. It's one thing for it to happen, but it's a total another thing for it to be ignored. And I heard a story of one of the YouTube videos I watched, uh, where doctors in the old days, I don't know what year it was, but it goes back a while, 1900s, 1800s, and doctors, they were actually, I guess they were students, or they were doctors and students, and they would, be there for pregnant women giving birth, and they would handle the birth. And a lot of the babies, a high percentage of the babies died. They would die at birth. And then there was another group that weren't students and weren't doctors. I guess they were midwives, and they would give birth. They would help give birth for the women, and their percentage of babies that died was extremely small. So women would cry and fight and not want to go and have their baby with the doctors uh, because of the high rate of mortality, and they didn't want their baby to die. So they'd rather have the baby in the street rather than go to the doctors. So another doctor, I don't know that he was even a baby doctor or an obstetrician, I guess I called, uh, did a study. Found, he wanted to know why one group had a small number and one group had a big number, and the big number was the doctor's number. So he did a research into what they did and all that, and found that a lot of the doctors, I guess because they were students too, were in the morgue a lot of the time. They were in the morgue with dead people, and they would go from the dead people to giving birth to the babies, and they never washed their hands. They wouldn't wash their hands before they went from the dead person to the baby, and the babies would die. So obviously, that was the link. And he wrote a paper on it, published it. Said had he actually did a study and had doctors wash their hands. I don't know what kind of soap they use, special soap, considering the time I'm talking about, and that to wash their hands. And the numbers came down. The dead babies came down. There weren't as many. So it was clear, a direct correlation, a direct link. And they published a paper on it and his findings. And he was called crazy. And they fought him. They fought his findings. They fought everything about the whole thing. The doctors did not want to admit that they had been killing thousands and thousands of babies by not washing their hands. They didn't want to admit that. And since someone found out that that's what they were doing, they attacked him. They put him in a psych ward, and he was beat up in the psych ward by an orderly, and he somehow got an infection from the beatdown, and the infection killed him. So he died in the psych ward from an infection, and he was in the psych ward because he found out why babies were dying. So, and it took years before the medical, now you can't go anywhere near a hospital of any kind and not see them washing their hands. There's soap and sinks everywhere, or hand sanitizer on the wall everywhere. And that came about because of this man. And he was killed and vilified and called crazy because of the findings that he came up with. And he spoke the truth. And he was attacked and killed for it. And, so it's hard for the mental industry to say they're wrong, to say they're killing people. They killed 3 babies. Obviously, that's the way it goes down. They killed 3 babies with their practice, and they don't want to own up to it. They'd rather put her in jail and blame her, put her in a psych ward and blame her, instead of owning up to what they did. And again, stupid again, very stupid. And this is the world we live in, where we have great things are invented and great things are squashed. And great batteries were invented, and the oil industry and the car manufacturers bought the patents for those batteries and burned them because they were making gas engines. The oil industry was selling oil. They didn't want anything to do with an electric battery that did away with the need for oil and the need for a gas engine. So they attacked it and they burned it. And, that's common practice. And that's what they do. So, all to protect the shareholders. And, we live in a very evil world, a very evil country, because we're the leaders of this, and I think it's got to stop. I think the trial for her has to stop. I don't believe she'll be found convicted or guilty. I don't believe that'll happen. But there's other issues. This boy in Mississippi that was killed on 4th of July, the black boy, and when you see the pictures of him, he's the only black boy, and he's surrounded by white boys. Surrounded by white boys. And I believe the issue of that weekend when he was killed, and they didn't say he was killed, but I believe he was. And he was trying to date a white girl in Mississippi. And believe me, That wouldn't be the first black guy hung up to dry because of that reason. So I think it's very suspicious that a black boy is killed. Had a promising football career, I believe, and that was gone. Had signed a contract or got a scholarship for a college, which he was planning on going to, and you know, jealous white boys who didn't have a contract probably ended his life, and they didn't like that the girl liked him, and he was the only black guy in the crowd, and it's no surprise that he's also the only one that was dead. So I think these kind of issues are ignored, and I think the Mississippi police are protecting the white boys, and the autopsy. They had two autopsies, and the second autopsies, the organs and parts they needed to look at were discarded and couldn't be looked at. And I believe that's on purpose. Uh, I think when you have a black and a white, the white's always going to win, the black's always going to lose, especially in the South. And you know, and I don't know this black boy that just trying to get a new trial, and he stabbed the white boy, um, but it was in self-defense, as he says, and I believe him. I believe it was self-defense. The white boy was much bigger. He was a football player, so he not only that doesn't mean he's guilty because he's a football player, but football players come with an attitude, and that's why they're good football players. But I think they they did something to this black boy and made him feel his life was threatened. And again, he was the only black boy in the crowd, and they tried to charge him. He was convicted of murder, and he's looking for a new trial. And there were no black jurors. Everybody on the jury was white, so you have to question that, you know. And I think they had the outcome of the trial already predicted before the trial started. Just as they have the outcome of the Mississippi boy killed already decided. But now Lance Lacey, she's white, so I don't think it's decided. I think if she was black, it probably would be decided. But I think she has a chance of winning. I mean, either way, winning or losing, she doesn't win. She lost her kids. She lost her ability to move. So I don't see where she wins. But it is that much better if she goes to a hospital. And again, I hope they don't treat her like a murderer or quasi because she's found not guilty for reason of insanity. But I don't think she deserves to spend the next 20 years in in a mental hospital because of what she did. You know, I don't think she is mental today. I think her problems are handled, and I think she's no threat to society. So I don't feel that she should be treated in a quasi way of doing time in a mental ward instead of a prison. And that's not the way it works. You're found not guilty, and you go home. And she has to take a stop at the mental ward, maybe, to get her life straight, and that's fine. But we're not talking another 20 years. So, you know, I think all the way they treat these people needs to change, needs to come into reality, and you know. So, like I said my piece. This world's messed up, and the problem is nobody's trying to fix it. And the Democrats and the Republicans, Nazis on the left, Nazis on the right. You're not going to get any help as long as that's the case. So I think everybody in Congress, anybody in Congress or Senate over 60 needs to be fired. President as well. Anybody over 60 should not be in office. And I think that alone would do great good for the country. So, and the problem is most of the people that vote are over 60. So that's your problem.